Welcome to the UNNI Podcast. I'm your host, Bianca McCall, and today our journey begins in the fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, and it takes us across the globe to connect with heroes in their own rights in the space of suicide prevention to help us reach a cure for suicide. Thank you to our listeners from around the world and survivors from all spaces and walks of life for sharing your stories responsibly. The UNNI Podcast is now an affiliate of the Mental Health News Radio Network, the only podcast network in existence, serving as a beacon for mental health and wellness information, testimony, and resources. Welcome back to the UNNI Podcast. I am here this morning with a special guest in a special circumstance because the UNNI Podcast just joined the Mental Health News Radio Network. It's a network that is the only one in existence that has over 80 podcasts linked to it that talks exclusively about mental health topics. And the reason why this guest is so special is because we are going to be able to talk about or discuss several mental health topics when we talk about your journey. So Shawnta Jackson is here with us from the Washington D.C, Baltimore City area or Metropolitan Area, and she's here to share her journey, her walk of life. Shawnta, please, thank you so much for being here on the show. I'm so excited to dig into some of the projects and things that you're working on currently in the space of health, of wellness, of resiliency, of being a woman with lived experiences and surviving different circumstances. Shawnta, will you please share with the listeners from all over the world, really, just a little bit about who you are, what you're working on in your space, and what it looks like in your area of the world.
Well, hello, everyone, and thanks so much for having me, Bianca. My name is Shawnta Jackson, and I am the author of The Journal of a Woman with Lived Experiences, a 21-day guided journal. And my purpose in life is to help people to help themselves and others. And in order for me to help others, I have to make sure that I am mentally strong enough to be able to do that, and that I'm in a space mentally, and then not just mentally, but also physically and even spiritually, that I'm in a space to be able to do that, and that goes the same for others. And one thing that I have learned to do is, or that I've kind of mastered, and I'm always still growing and I'm always still learning about myself as well. But one of the things that I have learned to do is to self-coach and self-motivate myself, and then also to partake in activities that serve as a form of self-care and self-therapy to maintain, build, and grow my mental strength. And the reason that I even started on this journey to share my personal journal entries and share my story and to help others, I was kind of prompted by a friend. I've always in my adult life journaled, and out of shame, embarrassment, and not necessarily guilt, but more so shame and embarrassment, I would throw my journals away because I didn't want anyone to find them. And then in 2019, I decided that, that was going to be my year of travel, my year of self-exploration, and then also that I was going to start a journal, and this journal was going to be special because it was something that I was going to share with my son. My son is 15 years old, and I wanted to leave behind something for him to remember me by, and to know who his mother was. And so when I wrote in the journal, I actually wrote, "In life, this book belongs to Shawnta Jackson. In death, I wrote that it belonged to my son." And so I was reading the journal entries. So now I started the journal in the beginning of 2019. And towards the end of 2019, in the fall, I was reading my journal entries to a friend. And I was telling him, I started to get a little embarrassed again. And I said that, you know what, I'm going to throw this away. I don't want anyone to see this. Mm-hmm. And he actually stopped me in that thought process. And he encouraged me And he said, no, that's your legacy. That's who you are. The things that you experience, that's your life journey, and you could possibly help someone. And that's when I got the aha epiphany moment to publish my journal entries as a book. And so my journal entries were not written for a book. And my first journal entry is called the power of storytelling. It's actually owning your story, the power of storytelling. Mm-hmm. And in this first journal entry, which is my longest journal entry, I share a story of resilience. And in my book, I serve two purposes. One, I'm being vulnerable, and I'm sharing how I process my thoughts and how I reflect, and I have my planning and different things like that, and how I view the world around me, and how I respond to the world around me, and how I respond to myself. So I'm sharing that aspect, so that there's Shawnta the individual that's being vulnerable, but then there's Shawnta the professional. I have a master's in public health degree focusing on social and behavioral health. And I'm a professional consultant. And so the other hat is me serving as a coach, a mentor, and advisor. And I share my personal story of resilience because I want people to understand who I am and why I think the way that I do. I'm single. I'm dating. I'm a single parenting person, meaning that I make all of the parental decisions myself, and I'm dating. And so there's a lot of different pressures, being a professional woman, a woman of color, single in America, dating. And so that's why I share that story, so you can know why I think the way that I do. But then also that story is a story of it's a story of resilience from an unhealthy relationship. And I know that there are people right now, and particularly women, who are in unhealthy relationships where there's physical abuse, there's control, there's verbal abuse. And I literally left that relationship. The last day that we were together, I slept in the bed with my shoes on because I wasn't allowed to leave the house. And the next day I snuck out of the house with my son. Mm-hmm. And so, I am originally from Las Vegas, and I went to college undergrad in Chicago. And while I was in Chicago, my freshman year was my second semester freshman year. I'm 19 years old. I met this guy, he's my boyfriend. So my boyfriend, I'm 19, he's 25, and he has 5 children from different relationships, from previous relationships. He has 5 children, and we pretty much, I defy my parents and not really listening to the advice that they're giving me. And I ended up living with my boyfriend, and we get married when I'm 21 years old. So I'm 21 years old, undergraduate in college, married with 5 stepchildren. And that relationship was unhealthy. And what was, and this is my personal experience, and what is kind of sad, and when I look back on it and I think about the things that I went through and how it affects me now, that was the one person who was the nicest person to me, would spoil me, just did a lot of nice things for me. He was a provider. He paid all the bills, like all of the fairy tale stuff. But at the same time, while he was the nicest person to me, he was also the meanest person to me. I've never in my life encountered anyone like him, even since the relationship ended. And that marriage ended in, my divorce was final in 2006. It was final. Mm-hmm. And so the relationship it was unhealthy. It was physical abuse, but it wasn't on a consistent basis, meaning that it would be maybe a few times a year when it got physical. But then there was still the verbal abuse, and there was the control, and then on top of that, cheating. And so just kind of mentally, and then before I knew it, I was almost kind of like isolated. I didn't have many friends. Before you know, you just kind of look up and you're in the situation. And we went on a road trip one day with his daughters, my stepdaughters, 2 stepdaughters, and his mother from Chicago to Atlanta. And he treated me so cruel during that trip. And I remember him hitting me while I was holding my son. And it was a few weeks before my son's first birthday. And we were in Atlanta for his grandmother's birthday. And I was holding my son, standing against the wall, and he hit me. And all I could think of was he hit me hard enough to where if he would have hit my son, who knows what would have happened, what the outcome would have been. And my son then hit me. And so now, just psychologically, I'm in this space. I'm in Atlanta. I'm not home. So that happened during the trip. And on the way back from Atlanta to Chicago, we stopped at like anywhere town, USA. I don't know, maybe Indiana somewhere. I don't know where we were at. And I was riding it. His mom was driving the entire time, and he was in the front, and I was in the back with the kids. And we stopped at a gas station. I sat in the front seat, thinking that, you know what, maybe we can kind of rotate and switch roles. And I sat in the front seat, and he came back out of the store, and he looked at me, and he dismissed me like I was a dog or like a child. Like he shooed me with his hand, and he was like, "What are you doing? Get back in the back seat." And at that moment, before I could think of it, I just said, "You know what? Fuck you." But that wasn't any type of fuck you. That was, you know what? I'm finished with this. Like, I'm done. And so during that trip, he went in, and because I did that, I triggered him, and he went on a rage. And I had $200 that I put in my sunglass case. Something just told me to take some money, put it in your sunglass case. And so I put the $200 in my case, and I couldn't let him know that I had any money. And he was talking to me so bad that everyone in the car was crying except for myself and my son. So his daughters are crying and his mother is crying. He's treating me like this in front of his mother. He took his wedding ring off, threw it out the window. And we stop at another place, and I'm just trying to get it close enough to Chicago so that I can get in a cab to go to the airport. I coincidentally had a plane ticket for that same day because I was pre-planning my son's first birthday party in Las Vegas. And so I had a plane ticket, and all I had to do was just make it to the airport. And so I finally, we made it to Chicago, and after a while, he chased me around the car. He tried to get me to get in the car with him, and I knew something just told me, I was thinking about like those Lifetime movies, and something just told me, do not get in that car. If you get in that car, I was just afraid that we would die in traffic on the expressway or something like that. But I say that to say I want to put everything in context. Mind you, I went on a road trip, and so I only had the clothes for the road trip. And so I'm back in Chicago, and I'm trying to hurry up and get to the airport. So on my person, I have my son, $200, my son's car seat and his clothing, and 3 pairs of dirty clothes. That's what I had for me. And that's how I went to Vegas, back home to my family. I never went to my home. So just imagine today you leaving your home and you don't have time to your personal records, your financial records, your personal belongings, my baby pictures, my son's ultrasound pictures, nothing, my jewelry, clothing, nothing. I just literally I showed up home to my family with $200 and a baby. And when I look at the photo of myself, I was frail, like I was really small. And when you're in the moment, you don't realize sometimes how unhealthy your situation is. And somehow we tried to make it work again. He ended up coming to Las Vegas. We probably lived together for 2 or 3 months. And then that's how the very last night we were together, we got into a one-sided argument. And I was trying to leave the house just to be an adult about the situation, to let him cool off. And then I was coming back home. and he refused to let me leave the house. Everything that I had was his, so I couldn't leave the house in his car. And then, okay, I'll walk. He didn't know that I had a friend that lived around the corner. I never told him that she lived there. So really what I was going to do was just walk to her house. Mm-hmm. And he said, no, you can't leave with my son. So that was the first time that he used my son against me. And so that night, I pouted, went upstairs, and I slept in the bed with my shoes on. And the next day he went to go somewhere, I think maybe to get something to eat. At the time, I was a loan officer and a real estate agent. And I grabbed my laptop, my business cards, my son. And 2 weeks later, we had a condo. And I never looked back. And so twice, I kind of started my life over within a short period of time. And so by the time I was married when I was 21. And by the time I was 25, my divorce was final.
Wow.
And
so this relationship, and just so you know, I was fortunate enough to receive a copy of Shawnta's book, The Journal of a Woman with Lived Experiences. And just before I kind of get into my response, Shawnta, how can people access this book from anywhere? Is it on sale, Amazon? Is it available for audio listening? How can you get your hands on this book?
So for now, there's only a paperback copy available, and it's only available at ShawntaJackson.com. So that's my personal website at ShawntaJackson.com.
Okay. And so for me, like I said, I was fortunate enough to receive a copy of your book. I read through your story, and so many things jumped out. Number one, I think just to give the listeners an idea of this is one story of resilience for you, in your lifetime. But to give them an idea of what this process has been like, you were in this abusive relationship where there was intimate partner violence that was occasionally physical, in addition to mental, emotional, spiritual abuse. And this lasted for about 4 or 5 years. Is that about right?
6 years, because
6 years
we lived
total.
together. We lived together for 2 years before we were married.
So 6 years in total. Can you share with us, because I remember reading, in your book that you met him second semester of your freshman year in college. And when I think back to my own college experiences, freshman year, you're really finding yourself, you're really finding your identity, during that time. For a lot of folks, or a lot of young people, they're breaking away from their family systems and their natural environments for the first time, sometimes in one's lifetime. And you kind of, during that time, you do everything to the most, right? You OD on everything, trying to find your identity. Will you share with the listeners a little bit how was that process of finding your identity, and how it led to finding someone who was essentially kind of breaking you down or beating down that identity? How significant was it that the time that this happened was during a time where you're supposed to, as a young woman, find yourself and know yourself, and without having that opportunity and entering into an abusive relationship, how significant is that, in terms of the bigger picture of your life's journey?
Well, keep in mind, I grew up in Las Vegas, and
okay.
So meaning that I kind of grew up a little bit more independent and faster than a lot of other teenagers or youth across the country. Not to say I wouldn't compare Las Vegas to like a New York or Baltimore or LA or anything like that. But I just thought I was grown, and now that I'm thinking about it, when I was 13, like I always wanted to be a housewife. I don't know what images, I don't know what happened or why I wanted to be that, but I always wanted to be a housewife. I also wanted to be a model, an actress, a businesswoman, and I'm doing all of that stuff too. But that was just one thing that I always wanted, and I never wanted a lot of boyfriends. And so when I met him, he was pretty impressive.
Sure.
And like you said, I'm away from my family and my support system. And I think I'm in Chicago by myself. I moved myself into the dorm. I'm in a fast city. And mind you, when I was a teenager, I had a fake ID. When I was in high school, I was going to college parties. And then, so I think I'm kind of grown. And so if I meet a boyfriend, I don't need to find and explore myself because I'm ready to settle down because I'm grown. Right. And he's a flashy guy. He has a lot of disposable income. And so that meant that there was the security that was there. And I felt like I could learn a lot from him. I felt like he had a lot to offer. And my dad told me, he said, you're going to outgrow him. So I didn't realize my potential. I didn't know my potential. I was confident. I was smart, but I didn't know who I was. And even to this day, I'm continuously amazing myself, and I'm continuously building my self-confidence and not talking down on myself to achieve the things and to try the things that I want to do. And so so he saw something in me before I saw it in myself.
Sure.
And being the controlling person that he was, it was kind of like he wanted to take that away. Like I was playing around in different careers. I went to college, and then I never really practiced public relations. That's what I went to school undergrad for. And then I became a real estate agent in Illinois. And then I just remember going out to an appointment, and I said, these are the addresses that I'm going to look at some properties and talk to some people. And he said, well, why are you telling me now? You didn't ask me before you did the list. And I'm like, okay, I didn't know I had to ask you about my professional career. I'm just, just letting you know. I'm telling him for safety reasons. And then I would leave the house, and he would say, when you blow up or when you get big, don't forget about me. And I think my personality is I'm not necessarily, I have been, and I have a tendency to be a people pleaser, and I don't consider myself to be a people pleaser now, or at least not as much. But I don't know, like you feel like you have to be loyal or obligated to someone or, to help them. And then in the process, I think I kind of like lost myself.
Yeah. And so you bring up a good point, and we've got the UNNI Podcast is fortunate enough to have listeners from different countries and all over the U.S. You bring up a great point of growing up in Las Vegas, Nevada, may or may not have had a certain influence or significance in you growing up pretty fast, or growing up and thinking about very adult, constructs and ideals early on. And so, like you mentioned, at age 13, you were already fantasizing about being a housewife and being settled down, and safety and security were your priorities, in seeking and building relationships. Can we talk about just kind of how the environment and how your environment, shapes that type of thinking, shapes that type of relationship building?
Yes. As an adult now, I reflect back and I think, and I'm like, what did my parents teach me about relationships? And my father is and was very active in my life. Every childhood activity he put me in, I was a cheerleader. I took modeling. He would take me every Saturday to modeling school and sit outside and wait. He taught me how to drive. When I was 16, I moved with my dad. But my father was single and never married, and my mother was single. My parents, I have no childhood memory of my parents ever being together. And my mother is a very attractive woman, and she was single and dating. So I remember boyfriends, but I always had my dad around for, security, leisure, and a lot of museums, travel, different things like that. But I'm not so sure about this, but my conclusion, I could be wrong, but what I was thinking is I loved my father, and girls usually fall in love with their father. That's the first man you love, and they teach you certain things. But again, I think he wasn't in my home with me and my mom. So I've never seen a man really love and cherish and take care of my mother. And she's very, very independent.
Yeah.
And I am too. So she's
Right.
very, very independent. But it can sometimes, and I even talk about this in one of my journal entries. I don't want to be so independent that I'm alone for the rest of my life, because I feel like I don't, quote unquote, need a man. But with my father, I've never seen him. I recall maybe one relationship. He had a girlfriend, but I've never really seen him love and care for and be in a relationship with a woman. And so I think that's where, so when I meet this guy, I'm not really, and then the conversations, I don't know if my parents kind of assumed, if one parent assumed that the other parent was talking to me, but just the conversation of the coaching and teaching your child, about healthy relationships, trust, communication, and respect. I necessarily didn't have those. I don't recall any of those conversations with either of my parents, even though they loved me and they demonstrated love to me. But just that coaching aspect and helping you to know yourself and build self-esteem. And I don't even know if self-esteem is the right word, but I was just thinking back about, okay, I think what I've learned from my father was more so that's where the security, that attraction was, right? Like I said, I thought that I could learn from him, and he could teach me certain things, and he would provide for me. And then, like I said, my mother, I never, now that I think about it, I've never seen her in a relationship. I'm not to say that she hasn't had a relationship, but I've never seen her in a long-term, consistent, healthy relationship. But I've never witnessed abuse. I've never witnessed anything like that.
Yeah, and so I'm kind of pulling from certain things that came up with your book, and so just kind of explain the structure of the book. A little bit, it opens up with your sharing of your story, and then it's a guided journal process where there's several entries that one will make and you speak about this. You speak about manifesting love and being a very active participant in creating the love and joy that you experience, not only internally but what you're seeking, what you're attracting, right? And some other things came up from what you just said about balancing independence and relationships and all of these kind of milestones in your own understanding of your own journey. You've kind of created this structured, guided journaling process, and that you've released and have shared with the world. Can you explain a little bit more of how these topics came to be, where the structure has come from? Is it your typical kind of evidence-based, you can Google, how do I share my story? Or is this so closely related to your your process of healing? You know, has this worked before your eyes?
The latter. It's worked before my eyes. And so that first journal entry is the story of resilience, and really it's about the power of storytelling, because it's owning who you are in your story and something that you've been through. But the idea is that you should be proud of yourself. You should be proud of yourself that you made it through. So resilience is your ability to go through something and you process and you come out of that. And sometimes we're human, so there's no such thing as necessarily as getting over something. But the fact that you've moved through it, and I think I came out on top, and so that's the resilience.
At what point did that happen for you, that you were able to say, you know what, I'm proud that I'm a survivor, you know, rather than a victim? At what point did that happen for you?
I think the moment I left. I literally left. I didn't want to. Something just happened, and it was just, you know what, I can do this. And maybe it was because of the things that he said to me. He told me I was a smart, dumb bitch and that I would never have anything. The only reason I have anything is because of my dad, and I'll never meet anyone like him, and no one else would ever want me. And a part of me was like, you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong. And he actually, he took my wedding ring from me, and I remember giving it to him, and I said, don't worry about it. I'll get another one. So it's almost kind of like me proving, like, that fight. But success is the best revenge. And it's not that's not my motivation behind it. But I do recognize that, like, I'm very, very proud of myself. And if I ever see him, or when I see him face to face, I'm very, very proud of myself. And I'm very well aware of how I appear. I'm healthy. I drink water. I have nice skin. And the reason I'm saying these things is because I didn't let it, the words that he said, they didn't come true. Like, I proved you wrong, and I never have to mention it to you. But I know when you look at me, I know what you see. And so that's, you know, I'm proud. But I think just from the very moment, I got into survival mode. And it was always in me. So that's the thing. It was always in me. Remember I said that my dad saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. And my dad told me that I was going to outgrow him. Mm-hmm. And all of the activities and the things that he had me involved in. And my mom, she was always, since a child, always been proud of me. But I didn't create some type of value system for myself. And even him, to the abuse and the control, he has personal issues. But for me to be in that situation, he was seeing my assets and my skills before I even saw it in myself. And so just one day, like I said, it was always in me, and I just kind of let it out. But to answer your question about the structure of the book, what I did was, in the process of writing the book, I engaged with the individuals that follow me on social media. And I asked them, you know, I'm in the process of writing a book. I'm sharing my journal entries. And should it be a 1-year journal, 45 days, 30 days, 21 days? And the people chose 21 days. And so that's why there's 21 journal entries. Oh. And then now I'm like, okay, what is I've never had a guided journal. This is my first guided journal. And so I went into different stores, and I'm looking at guided journals, and what was missing was the personal stories. There are not. I haven't had the opportunity to read Michelle Obama's book and her journal, but there aren't too many journals out there where someone is sharing their real life journal entries that they did not write for a book, that they edited. I did make some edits to it just to make sure that it was clear, but I did not write these journal entries for a book. So I have 21 journal entries, and I started reading, and my journal is a year long. And I started pulling, like, just reading different journal entries And my background, I'm an evaluator. And so that means that I do a lot of what they call qualitative data analysis, meaning that I can look at words and look at paragraphs, or I can listen to conversations. And out of those conversations or those transcripts, I can identify common themes or codes based off of that conversation. And so that's what I did for myself. I actually read my journal entry and I said, that's a positive affirmation. That's an expression of gratitude. That's expecting love. That's striving for success. That's life visioning. That's and one, I was like, I don't know what to call this. Those are just spontaneous thoughts. And so the format of the book is I introduce the topic. So remember, I told you that I'm wearing two hats. One is me, Shawnta, the individual. Then the other is like the mentor, the coach, the advisor. And so I'm introduced. So the first journal entry, I'm introducing the topic, and I don't mind reading one to you. And so I'm reading I'm sorry, not reading. I'm introducing the topic. And then on the next page, I share my actual personal journal entry. And then after I share my journal entry, I provide a prompt for the reader. And it's usually it's a statement or in the form of a question. And then I leave actual space. I have about 3 pages per journal entry, and I leave space for the reader to write. And so this is also a book. I'm sharing my personal journal entries, but it's also a guided journal, and there's space for the reader to write. And if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind sharing my second journal entry with you, which is positive affirmations.
Sure. Yes, please. Thank you.
And so the introduction, solely focusing on the negative emotions and aspects of our lives increases our stress level and can drive some into deeper depression and anxiety. The purpose of this guided journal is to help reverse those negative emotions, yes? Well, let's make it a common practice to make positive statements about ourselves and our lives. You can actually motivate yourself and manifest positive thoughts by writing personal messages to yourself and reciting them on a regular basis. Remember today's date. It is the date that you wrote your first positive affirmation to yourself in this journal. Once this journal is complete, reflect on this day and the time in between. You should feel more empowered. Shawnta's second journal entry. I love the person that I am. I love the person that I'm becoming. I'm strong enough to be weak and vulnerable, but tough enough to handle the things that come my way and wise enough to protect myself from false and negative people. I'm working on my mind and my spirit. I'm setting new standards and values for myself. I love myself. I'm beautiful inside out. I'm humble, sincere, fortunate, blessed, kind, and respectful. I respect others and I try to right my wrongs. I'm my father's daughter and my mother's child. I'm the descendant of my grandparents, their parents, and their parents. God bless them all. Bless their living spirits. I know that I make them proud and that I'm a reflection of them. I'm at peace. I'm not perfect. I feel weak sometimes, and I've made a lot of irresponsible and bad decisions in my life, and I don't like that I've put myself in certain situations, but I'm not going to hold these things against myself. God has kept me. He is protecting me and giving me his grace and mercy, and I'm so thankful for that. I just pray that moving forward, I don't repeat some of the same mistakes and decisions that I've made. I'm choosing not to be jaded by my experiences, especially my experiences with men. However, while I'm not jaded, I'm conscious and aware. You're Shawnta Jackson. I'm Shawnta Jackson. Be proud, smile, and own it. Your second journal entry, positive affirmations. Be kind to yourself. Be proud of yourself. Remind yourself of who you really are or who you are aspiring to be. And then I leave space for the reader to write. And I know some of us are kind of trying to find ourselves or refine ourselves and reassess of, who we are. And so that's why I say, remind yourself of who you really are or who you are aspiring to be.
And I think this is it's a wonderful practice. Positive affirmations have found their way into the structure and the milieu of several different approaches, to healing, and to moving about grief processes and in the building blocks of resilience. I also notice in your book, as you've kind of described this amazing process of conceptualizing, a year's worth of journal entries into these topics, or this 21-day guided process. Love and gratitude is reoccurring. It's a reoccurring theme throughout the entire book. All the different subjects and topics kind of go back to that. And so, I'm kind of thinking that your process of healing, a large part of your success has been staying focused on, the loving process, loving yourself, and manifesting positive and healthy love, or loving connections with others. And then also just gratitude. And I'm sorry, just if I'm just outside looking in, I'm just like, gosh, you've been through all these terrible things. And I myself, my life's journey, there's been a lot of just crazy stuff that's happened. How do you make the decision to just stay positive and grateful throughout that? I think that's what a lot of people may struggle with.
It's a habit, and I'm not always positive. And that's why I write the positive affirmations. And actually in the book, I actually provide a daily practice. And I encourage the reader to write down 3 positive affirmations on a piece of paper and to post those on your bathroom mirror or your bedroom wall. And then also to write down 5 things that you're grateful for. And I don't repeat them every day, but I do have them on my bedroom wall. And I remind myself to say what I'm grateful for. So when I'm feeling high and I'm feeling up, it's wonderful. But sometimes I get anxiety, or I get nervous, or it's just a bad day. But then I look up and it's just a reminder. It's there. Even if I ignore it, I'm like, I'm not in the mood for that. But it's still there. So the messages that we receive in social media, the music that we listen to, the things that we say to ourselves, even if it's negative, it can become a habit, and it's ingrained in us, and we're feeding our subconscious, and we're beings of energy, and so we could bring in negative energy, and we can be really down and really hard on ourselves. And one thing that I do is I talk to myself. So this is a form of me learning, again, how to coach myself and how to motivate myself when I'm feeling down, or when I'm not motivated at all. And by me writing these positive affirmations and saying these positive affirmations to myself and being intentional about the type of messaging, for example, what's going on right now with the racial climate, of course, I'm not ignoring it. Of course, I'm an advocate for myself and for my people. However, I have to be mindful of the attitudes and the emotions of others, and what I feed in my own spirit and my energy.
Right.
And I listen to, I'll go on YouTube and I type in positive affirmations. Uh-huh. And I don't meditate often, but I take deep breaths and I tell myself, I'm worthy, I am positive, and I'm feeding this to my subconscious. I'm feeding it to my mind. Do you ever listen to a song and then it could be 2 days later or later that day, and then all of a sudden the song is just stuck in your head all day and you can't just get it out your head? You keep singing it.
Yeah, it's happening.
So that's the idea and the concept behind these positive affirmations and gratitude. And then also you're putting out positive energy and you're manifesting that. And I believe that it comes back to you. You express gratitude to the universe, or your universe can be God, depending on your spiritual beliefs or your religious beliefs. But I believe you put that energy out there and you express gratitude, and it comes back to you.
Well, I love what you say about the utility of positive affirmations, and they're there even if you're having an off day, so it's almost like building a house, right? So if you build the house, you lay the foundation with these positive affirmations, positive thoughts, gestures, messages, and you create that filter, around you, or that layer of protection around you, then it affords you the time, the space, and the natural kind of way of living, to where you might have good days, you might have bad days. And on those bad days, if you're surrounded by these positive messages that you created, that you built beforehand, then you have a greater chance at surviving those bad days, right? So it's a safety plan, it's a safety net, it's kind of your structure around you. I love that concept of build today what's going to protect you tomorrow. I have a question for you, Shawnta. Why is the discussion of suicide and suicide prevention, why is that so important to have in the space of survivorship from domestic violence or violent relationships in general? Why is suicide an important discussion?
Because I think we have to learn from others and learn from ourselves, and learn from others on how to be kind to ourselves.
Yeah.
And we all have our moments to where we have different levels of depression and different things like that. But I think self-love, I think it's a practice, and it's something that a lot of us have to learn, even as adults. And that's what my journey is. And I'm still exploring myself. I'm still learning, and I'm still challenging myself, and I'm trying different things. And I think you have to, when I opened up, I'm being careful and mindful of my words. When I opened up, I said that my purpose in life is to help people and to help others. But in order for me to help myself, I have to be at a certain space. And what I'm trying to do with this book, if nothing else, is to help others to be in that space, to where, you know what, I have these thoughts and I have these feelings, but they're not going to take over my mind. And I talk to myself. I feel like, like those cartoons when you were younger, it was like the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder.
Yeah.
And I think and I say certain things about myself. And then I say, "Nuh-uh, Shawnta, not today. No, we're not going to think like that." And I think the positive affirmations and the notes to myself, and me being mindful of the people that I spend my time around. So it's not just, yes, we can be our enemies and we can be our saviors as well. But then also the relationships that we have around us and the people that we have around us. It could be toxic relationships or just negative energy. And there's this book there's the psychologist, her name is Amy Morin. Mm-hmm. She wrote 13 Things Emotionally Strong People Don't Do. And one of them was being a people pleaser. And not putting yourself in situations where you feel bad. Well, let me take that back. It's okay. It's okay for people to be upset with you. It's okay for people not to like you. It's okay you don't have to be around these people. You don't have to listen to their toxic conversations. If that person is putting you down, or if you don't feel good in that space, it's okay for them to be upset with you. They'll get over it. And if they love you and they care for you, they'll get over it. It's okay. But then also, for me, it's just, I guess like self-awareness learning yourself, exploring yourself, and that's the purpose of this journal. I know a lot of therapists and counselors and psychologists, social workers, faith-based leaders. They advise their friends, clients, and patients to journal, but a lot of people don't know how to journal, and a lot of people don't know where to start. And I have a background in social and behavioral health, and so I did kind of. It's not that I looked up or I'm modeling after an evidence-based approach, but I did look at peer-reviewed journals, and I did look at what psychologists had to say just to make sure that I was giving sound advice and not misleading anyone, and for my credibility. But I don't know how many people I will help. I know that I am helping people, and I know I opened my story about a relationship, and as you mentioned throughout, and I noticed that I talk a lot about love and gratitude, but I also talk about life visioning, and I have a bucket list, and so when I explain the bucket list, a lot of people think about death, and I'm not thinking about death. My bucket list for me, it means that these are the things that I want to do in life, and I'm writing these things down, and as I accomplish these things, I check them off my list, and then I create more things, and I add that to my list of things that I want to do, because it gives me something to live for and something to look forward to. Yeah. And so if anything, I don't know if I answered your question clearly or not, but if anything, I'm just modeling what has worked for me and what I think may work for others. And if anyone is out there listening, and if you do decide to purchase the book and use the guided journal, I'd really appreciate your feedback as well.
Yeah, no, and just to give you a little bit of background to what my train of thought or what my experience was, after receiving your book and working with your book, in telling my own journey as a suicide attempt survivor, I oftentimes use these metaphors and analogies to try to illustrate what I've gone through physically, psychologically, and spiritually, throughout my processes of trying to heal and come out of the darkness. And one of the examples that I've used in the past and in my testimony is, at times it feels like you're in a dark room, and there's kind of these flashes of light, these flashes of hope that illuminate, different pictures on the wall or different memorabilia of nostalgia and things in this room that I've kind of decorated it with. And those are my positive life experiences or things that, I would like to hold on to, that have kind of anchored me in this world. But the issue with depression and with anxiety and with these other examples of psychological distress that have really created a dark space in that room, I'm unable to see it. I'm unable to feel kind of that joy, and it's almost like trying to navigate a dark room, and the worst part of the experience is when you're navigating, you're kind of crawling around with your hands and things, and then you get your hands on something that's a negative energy, a negative reminder, a constant reminder of pain, and like you mentioned, listening to music and things like that. Everything that we do. Engaging with media, social media platforms, all these things. If you are attentioned to the negative aspects of that and you become a believer, right, of those negative messages, then it's very difficult. You get trapped, in that room. And so the reason why I love your book is that they do have those consistent themes of gratitude, of positive affirmation. And like you said, the envisioning, envisioning and manifestation is also such a huge part of it. And it's creating something positive, and I love I love the tie between we got to build a new house, for people that are experiencing suicidality. We've got to build a new house with a foundation and a structure of things being positive. And we have to create a sense of disbelief, for those negative messages. And I think that you're absolutely right. I think that, all of this, no matter what your life journey has been, no matter what struggles and challenges that you face and have overcome or are in the process of surviving, it always comes down to self-love and self-understanding. Because if you don't understand yourself, then you're more likely to believe somebody else's impression of you. And if that person is negative, that's pretty dangerous. That makes it a risk. The psychological distress is, and nobody's exempt from that. Anybody at any given moment, any tragedy, there's only, 1 degree of separation between us and someone who is in despair or in crisis, So as far as my feedback for the book, I think that it's got some great ideals in here, and the way that you've even structured it, and out of your own life experiences and your own journal entries, I think is remarkable. Will you share with us? I know that in 2006 is when you said that you ended the relationship, the past abusive relationship. You started writing this book, you said, in 2019.
Correct.
So there had been a 14-year kind of pass of you getting through these processes. Is that how it went? Did it take the 14 years to switch hats from Shawnta Jackson in this lived experience to Shawnta Jackson, the mentor, the survivor with lived experience, pulling others out of those circumstances?
Keep in mind that I've always journaled. And something in me, I don't know if it was, I traveled, I went to Thailand and I meditated there, and I just through life experience, and I built my confidence. But instead of me worrying about what others think about me, because that's really what it was. That's why I threw the journal entries away, because I was so concerned about what people would think about me, because I'm Shawnta Jackson and I always appear to be this, or I still represent my son. I still represent my family, my parents, and my family. And then in a lot of families, people keep secrets. There's certain things that you just don't talk about. You leave it alone. And so for me, it was more so courage to be vulnerable, and then a sense of responsibility to help others and to use my gift. I'm naturally a facilitator. I'm naturally an educator. I'm naturally a resourceful person. And that's something that I prayed about when I left Las Vegas. I went to grad school there, and I moved to Maryland for a job, and something that I had prayed about and I talked to God about. I said, okay, you take care of me and I'm going to take care of other people. And so that's why I say my purpose in life is to help people, to help themselves and others. And I've committed to that, and everything that I do is socially conscious. But that's Shawnta Jackson, the professional. And just this, we're not even 12 months out. We're still we're in the middle of 2020. And so fall 2019, I decided, you know what? I'm going to do it. I don't care what people think. This is my life. This is my one life. I have value. I have something to contribute. And in addition to me helping others, I can help myself, and I can become my best self. And this is going to help me grow as well. And so.
And how long would you say that process took? How long did it take for you to get to a place to where you were distant enough from those life experiences before you started to even just maintain a willingness and an openness to be able to help others?
fall 2019. This is new. This is new for me.
Yeah. And I think that's okay. And that's a great message to send to others, because when we look at the purpose for all of this, for the UNNI Podcast, for our discussions, it's to give a platform for survivors to tell their stories and to share this process of healing and awareness and awakening to the point to where we can help others, out of their dark spaces. And it's okay to take your time in doing that. I think that, it's important for survivors to understand that you've got to have the time and space to survive, to heal. It's surviving every day that makes you an expert, in the space. And so, taking that time to heal, and there's definitely things that you could be doing in the meantime as a part of that process. And what Shawnta, what you've shared today is the power of the journaling, the journaling as journal writing as a way to be able to reach the self-awareness.
Right. And Vince, not in this particular journal, but I often get a piece of paper, and if something, whether it's internal or external, is bothering me, I write it down and I'll scribble and I'll be mad. But I'm getting it outside of me, and I'm not holding it in.
Yeah. Yeah, and getting it out, writing it down, participating even in I think group discussions with other survivors with lived experience, that forms connections, the connectivity. And really, connections are, you mentioned that you started your book with, a description of how you were resilient in relationships. That's because relationships and connections are really, kind of at the root. They are the roots of all of this, of our existence, right? I mean, how we exist, the fibers and the fabric of what we can even envision for ourselves. It's all rooted in relationships.
Yes, whether positive or negative. If you think about anything in life, anything in this world, it has to do with the relationship. Even nature. No, the plant can't survive without soil, without water. There's always a dependence, and there's always a relationship.
Absolutely. Shawnta, thank you so much for today. I commend you on being a woman, on being a woman of color, that is a survivor. And at the point where you're sharing your survivor story to help so many others, get through their life experiences. It's a remarkable book. I highly recommend visiting the Shawnta Jackson website to purchase the book. Shawnta, will you share with the listeners how else they may be able to get a hold of you if anybody wants to continue the conversation and pick your brain about, their own journeys? How would one get in touch with you?
And so on my website, ShawntaJackson.com, I have there's an email address. I'm not that hard to find. So my contact information is on my website at ShawntaJackson.com. And then also you can engage with me on Facebook or Instagram at the Shawnta Jackson. So that's at the Shawnta Jackson, TheShawnta Jackson. Jackson is Jackson. And I engage with individuals, and I'm not to the point to where I can't accept private messages either. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And is there any other, any lasting message or anything else that we maybe didn't cover in the podcast today that you want the listeners to be aware about and keeping in mind? I mean, we've got listeners from all over the world. So on this platform, is there any other message that you'd like to send out?
Well, I do ship internationally wherever. As of now, I know that with COVID-19, some of the postal services are limited, but I do ship internationally, and you can purchase at ShawntaJackson.com. And there are benefits to journaling, clarification of your thoughts and feelings, a better understanding, a better personal understanding of yourself, release from stress and anxiety. And there's other positive impacts. How we feel also affects our heart and our physical health. And so it's important to, find the outlet that works for you. And I'm hoping that the Journal of a Woman with Lived Experiences can serve as a tool for you.
Thank you so much, Shawnta. It's been a pleasure. I'm sure we will reconnect along our journeys or the paths of our journeys in the future. But I sure do appreciate you joining us this morning from Washington, D.C, Metropolitan Area to share what your journey has been and to share your book with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for your time today. I'm your host, Bianca McCall. Remember, connect, create, be constructive. Help me and the many others doing amazing things in the space of suicide prevention, and reach in to give permission to those in crisis to reach out. Please, I welcome for you to share your thoughts, your feelings, your efforts, or the efforts of others in your communities with me. Please, you can find me on YouTube, on IG, on Facebook, under my agency's name, Desert Rose Counseling Group, or you can find me on LinkedIn under my name, Bianca McCall. We also have a website where we'll be posting our podcasts and updates on information. And until next time, stay safe, be well, be heroes.